Gospel according to Luke, the 8th chapter. Then Jesus and his disciples arrived at the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. And he stepped out on land. A man of the city who had demons met him. For a long time he had worn no clothes, and he did not live in a house, but in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he fell down before him and shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High? I beg you, do not torment me." For Jesus had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many times it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the wilds. Jesus then asked him, "What is your name?" He said, "Legion," for many demons had entered him. They begged him not to order them to go back into the abyss. Now there on the hillside a large herd of swine was feeding, and the demons begged Jesus to let them enter these. So he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When the swineherd saw what had happened, they ran off and told in the city and in the country. Then people came out to see what had happened, and when they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who had seen it told them how the one who had been possessed by demons had been healed. Then all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them, for they were seized with fear. So he got into a boat and returned. The man from whom the demons had gone begged that they might be with him. But Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." So he went away, proclaiming throughout the city how much Jesus had done for him. The Gospel of the Lord. Please be seated. And let us pray. Holy God, you show us your ways through your word and through prayer, how to live aright. And you show us too the model of not only what to do, but how to be. As we hear your scriptures today, show us how we can be better men, better women, better parents, and better people in the world. And so may the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. Amen. A variety of questions naturally arise from the gospel passage today, such as, are there really demons? Can people be possessed? Why did Jesus send them into a herd of pigs? And does this mean I shouldn't eat bacon? These are all very good questions. And the only one I can speak authoritatively on is the last one. But it stands that a man who is tormented and isolated, deranged, and damaging himself was, after an encounter with Jesus, clothed and in his right mind at the end of the day. An encounter with Jesus saves this man. And that is what we do know. Today is Father's Day. And on this day, we thank our fathers and honor the men who have given us life and guidance into adulthood. The men who taught us to use a drill, to grill a steak, to shake a person's hand, and to take a lady on a date. Yet, even as we honor these men, we do so with some reserve, for there has been growing concern over the last couple decades at least that fatherhood and manhood is in revision, even in crisis. in the West today. And so we remember this Father's Day with uncertainty about what is sometimes titled the male predicament of fatherless America. Our men and the structures by which we forge the masculine soul is being challenged, and society as a result. My focus during seminary and in my preparatory research for doctoral studies centered around men and male spirituality and contemporary men's issues. And I agree with many sociologists that men are faced with several unique issues by the modern world. And they're particularly fitting to reflect on this Father's Day. One core issue besetting men is their rolelessness in contemporary society in many ways. With shifting social roles in the workplace and in family life, men's place in the modern world is increasingly uncertain. As far back as we can see into history, and in every culture, men needed to be taught their role. For whatever reason, girls much more naturally become women, while boys have to be taught to be men. In all places and times until recently, boys in every culture went through a form of initiation to transform them, to take them from the world of the home and bring them into the world of their fathers, and to make them men. These initiation rites, almost universally observed, from ancient Europe to the Mayan, to New Guinea, to the Aboriginal Australians, to the ancient Indians. These initiation rites were ordeals which boys would undergo, where they would experience intense hardship of starvation, of eating rotten food, of being wounded, of prolonged exposure or abandonment in the wilderness, of fighting others or animals, or intense physical exertion to test their fortitude and their ability. During this time, boys were taught their stories and the legends of the tribe, and they learned who they were in relation to society and where their place was in the universe. They learned how to endure and to overcome as well as to grieve. And if they succeeded, and that is if, or those who did not were oftentimes killed, as they were of no value to the tribe. Those who endured emerged as new people, as men with new position and responsibility in society. There was in former times a clear passage through which boys learned to be men. And in the Middle Ages and early modernity, these were supplanted by apprenticeships and single-gender boarding schools, which served a similar function. But as these distinct passages have gradually disappeared in recent centuries, men seem to know less and less who they are. At the same time, there's a changing need for men and men's abilities in society. In times past, men were needed for the dangerous work for survival, the hunting, the fishing, the warring, and the grueling physical labor that was necessary for the defense and the provision of society. Men were almost universally warriors, and most men of the ancient past would have participated in warfare, and certainly in the hunt with predatory animals. Fighting and danger were a part of men's lives, and that is what they were needed for. Yet with the conquest of the forests and the domestication of the fields, the buildings of walls and structures, the extermination of predators, and the mechanization of hard labor and the specialization of warfare, the primal basic function to struggle, to fight, to defend, for most men has been rendered relatively obsolete. The society we have created no longer has an urgent need for masculine power and courage and craftiness for its survival. And while men's archetypal makeup and physique is still in place, It is no longer drawn upon as it was for millennia, and their primal energies have little place to go, channeled now fairly narrowly into violent video games or action movies or sports or the occasional hunting trip. The need for men has changed, and without guidance, it is translated into prevalent crime, where 90% of perpetrators are men, into substance abuse, which is 2 to 1 men over women, into suicide, which is 4 times, and into other forms of reckless and dangerous behavior. Coupled with these changes, men now function without clear role models in the modern world. There's a notable absence of vigorous, of able, of noble male figures in the public life as well as in art. Long gone are movie figures such as Gregory Peck or Jimmy Stewart or even Clint Eastwood. And most male characters today are anti-heroes or testosterone-fueled boys or even buffoons. Public role models are most commonly athletes who are still in many ways adolescents and not men. And neither in art nor real life are there noble male figures to show the way for young men to masculinity. Manhood and fatherhood seem to be taught. And without guidance, we find 30% of children now growing up in households without their biological father, with increasing delinquency and absenteeism among young males, and a generation of young men that doesn't have a clear picture of what they should do. We see the change in the church as well. As fewer men are involved, and as the church ceases to offer opportunities for the needs of men, churches that have ceased to offer these programs and honor men have seen the swiftest declines. And instead of complaining, men most often vote with their feet. And this is especially problematic and as politically incorrect as this sounds, and for whatever reason, faith tends to come through fathers. 20 years ago, a Swiss study was published titled The Demographic Characteristics of the Linguistic and Religious Groups of Switzerland. And Switzerland is one of the few countries that, in its censuses, also reports people's religious practice. And they were able to examine what factors were most indicative of a person's religious practice. And the study showed that, in conclusion, it was the religious practice of the father of the family that, above all, determined the future attendance or absence from church of the children. If both parents attended regularly, a third of children would become regular churchgoers and a third would attend irregularly. If a mother was regular but a father was absent, only 2% of the children would become regular, and a third would attend irregularly. But if the father were regular and the mother absent, 44% of the children would be regular, and over a third would be irregular attendees. Statistically, the influence of fathers on religious participation was 12 times that of mothers. As much as we love men, or as much as we love women, and appreciate all that they do, which is extraordinary, when the men are not engaged in church, the church declines. And on this Father's Day, as we honor the exceptional men we have in our lives, who have helped guide us into adulthood, who have provided for us at great expense to themselves, who have shown us fatherly love. As we do so, we may also wonder, what is the solution for the church, for our young men today, for our families, and for our society? And a solution I would put forward is Jesus. Just like the maddened, isolated, self-destructive man in the gospel who finds sanity in Jesus and finds a reconciliation to society, so do men today in Jesus find a role model who shows the way. A strong, a courageous, a compassionate, truth-telling, long-suffering, godly man. In him we see a map for what good and virile manhood is about. We see purpose of who we are and what we are for. And we find companionship and brotherhood, where we are known and restored. On this Father's Day, we give thanks and honor to our mothers, just as on Mother's Day, we give thanks and honor to our mothers. And in our church and in our need, we turn to both our fathers and our mothers for guidance. And above all, we turn to Jesus, who shows us the way to wholeness and to redemption. And all God's people say, Amen.